How do you win a war by not winning a fight? Sounds like a trick question, right? Imagine being a pilot in the thick of battle, your finger on the trigger, but your orders are to miss. Intentionally let your target slip away. Why would commanders, in the heat of combat, tell their pilots to hold back, to not fire? And more importantly, how did that strange tactic actually work to turn the tide of conflict? It's a story buried deep in the shadows of World War II air battles, a tale about trust, patience, and a kind of courage that didn't rely on sheer firepower, but on something far more elusive: restraint. Let's rewind to 1943, the skies over Europe ablaze with dogfights between Allied and Axis forces. The stakes were life and death, and the instinct to shoot first and ask questions later ruled most pilots. But there was one commander, a man named Colonel James "Jimmy" McAllister, who saw the war from a different angle. He wasn't just thinking about the bullets or the planes, but about what came after the fight. McAllister was in charge of a squadron flying P-51 Mustangs, tasked with escorting bombers deep into enemy territory. Their job was to keep the bombers safe, but the temptation to chase down every enemy fighter was almost irresistible. Yet McAllister ordered his pilots to sometimes hold their fire, to deliberately miss, or let enemy planes escape. To his men, it felt like madness. "Why let the enemy live when we could end the fight right then and there?" one pilot later recalled. But McAllister was playing a longer game, one that involved deception, psychology, and an understanding of the enemy's own fears. The Axis pilots, especially the Luftwaffe, were fierce and aggressive, but also cautious. McAllister knew that if his fighters wasted energy chasing kills, they'd tire and leave the bombers vulnerable. But there was a deeper, more strategic reason behind those orders. It was about teaching the enemy a dangerous lesson, that sometimes not every attack would land, and that could be worse than death. But how could missing on purpose be more effective than hitting the target? How did this strange strategy reshape what many thought was a straightforward aerial war? It's a twist that shocked pilots and commanders alike and left both sides questioning what real victory meant in the chaos of war. And so, with the sky above a battlefield of hope and fear, the stage was set for a confrontation unlike any other, one where the enemy's mind became the true battlefield. What happened next changed the way the air war was fought forever. Would you have the nerve to pull back the trigger when the world expected you to fire? That question haunted every pilot in McAllister's squadron. But the real question was, could their enemy's confidence be broken by a shot that never came? The tension in the cockpit was electric. Pilots were trained to hunt and destroy. Every instinct screamed to take down the enemy the moment they appeared in their sights. But McAllister's orders flipped that instinct on its head. His pilots were told to shadow enemy fighters, let them come close, and then miss, deliberately. At first, it felt like betrayal. One pilot named Tom "Red" Carlson described it as watching a meal walk away from the table. The enemy planes would buzz inches from them, vulnerable yet untouched. This wasn't just a game of nerves, it was calculated psychological warfare. By sparing certain enemy fighters, McAllister aimed to build a pattern, a story told by pilots on both sides. German flyers began to notice something strange. American escorts weren't always interested in an easy kill. Instead, they were probing, watching, waiting. The Luftwaffe pilots whispered about it in their mess halls. Were the Americans running out of ammo? Were they trying to lure them into traps? What they didn't realize was the exact opposite was true. McAllister's squadron was baiting them into overconfidence, into risky maneuvers. The Americans were teaching the enemy that sometimes a missed shot was more dangerous than a hit. This strategy came to a head during one of the most intense missions over the skies of northern France in late 1943. McAllister's squadron was escorting a group of B-17 bombers when they spotted a flight of German Focke-Wulf fighters gearing up for attack. Instead of rushing into fight, McAllister ordered his pilots to hold formation and shadow the enemy closely, but without firing. The German pilots, sensing hesitation, became reckless. They broke formation, trying to isolate and pick off what they thought were scared or inexperienced American escorts. One by one, the Luftwaffe planes fell into a deadly trap. As they scattered, McAllister's pilots struck with precision, focusing on isolated enemies rather than reckless chases. The result? The Germans lost more planes that day than they had expected, despite the Americans missing their first chances. McAllister's gamble paid off in a way that stunned both sides. It was a victory born not from raw aggression, but from calculated restraint and patience. But it wasn't just about tactics. The pilots who learned to pull back their triggers, to trust their commander's vision, discovered something deeply human about war. It wasn't just about destruction, but about control, about knowing when to fight and when to wait. And in that balance, courage was redefined. Yet as this quiet revolution in the skies unfolded, there was a looming question. Could this fragile strategy survive the chaos of battle? Could McAllister's men keep their nerve when the pressure to shoot became unbearable? Because in war, the hardest battles are often fought within. The air was thick with tension as McAllister's squadron faced their toughest test yet. It was early 1944, just before the D-Day invasion, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. The Allies were pushing harder into enemy territory, and the Luftwaffe was desperate to stop them. Over the skies of Normandy, a massive aerial battle erupted. Hundreds of fighters clashed, engines roaring, tracers cutting through the gray clouds. McAllister's pilots kept to their orders, shadow, don't shoot first. But inside each cockpit, a war was raging between instinct and discipline. One pilot, Sergeant Bill Hawk Johnson, would later describe the moment when an enemy FW-190 suddenly appeared just feet from him. His finger itched to pull the trigger, but he held back, trusting McAllister's command. The German pilot, confused by the hesitation, veered off, only to fly straight into the path of a hidden group of American fighters lying in wait. That was the moment the whole strategy crystallized. The ironic twist that turned the skies into a chessboard rather than a shooting gallery. By appearing cautious, even vulnerable, McAllister's pilots baited their enemies into making fatal mistakes. The Germans, expecting easy kills, flew right into ambushes, their confidence cracked, and with it, their ability to control the fight. On the ground, Allied commanders were stunned by the results. Squadrons using McAllister's restraint were outperforming others, relying on brute force. It was a quiet revolution in air combat, proving that sometimes not striking first was the fiercest act of courage. But the story didn't end there. There was something deeply human in this tactic, recognizing that war wasn't just about bullets and explosions, but about psychology, trust, and survival. Pilots who embraced the discipline found new strength, a kind of redemption from the chaos. On the other side, Luftwaffe commanders were forced to reconsider their approach. Their bravado had been met with unexpected patience, and that patience was deadly. They couldn't predict when the next attack would come, making every sortie a nerve-wracking gamble. For McAllister and his men, it was a testament to ingenuity and the messy, complicated humanity of war. They showed that victory sometimes came not from overpowering the enemy, but by outthinking them, and by having the courage to hold back when every fiber of your being screamed to strike. What would you have done in that moment with a life-or-death decision resting on whether to pull the trigger or not? In the end, McAllister's unconventional orders reshaped more than just tactics. They revealed something profound about courage in war. It's easy to think bravery means charging headfirst into battle, but sometimes real courage is knowing when to wait, when to trust your squad, your strategy, and even the enemy's expectations against them. That restraint saved lives, both Allied and Axis, and turned deadly encounters into calculated moments of psychological warfare. Pilots who learned to hold back found a new kind of strength, a quiet confidence that came from mastering fear rather than yielding to it. And there's an irony here. Missing on purpose, letting the enemy live, actually helped win the war. It's a reminder that war isn't just about destruction. It's about humanity, ingenuity, and the delicate balance between aggression and mercy. So, what would you have done, sitting in that cockpit, heart pounding, with your finger on the trigger? Would you have fired instinctively or trusted in the courage it takes to miss on purpose? If this story moved you, drop a comment below. Let me know what you think. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories where history's toughest choices reveal the deepest truths about humanity. Thanks for watching.